a first-class ticket, a devoted single father, and his 6-year-old daughter. It should have been the perfect start to a much-needed vacation. But aboard Global Voyager Flight 788, their luxury seats became the stage for a humiliating ordeal. One flight attendant's persistent suspicion, 3 demands for identification aimed only at them, and a single chillingly calm phone call that didn't just get them off the plane, it grounded the entire flight. This isn't just a story about poor customer service. It's a true account of quiet power, the price of prejudice, and the moment a man decided that his and his daughter's dignity was worth more than any destination. The scent of fresh coffee and the low, civilized hum of the Global Voyager Airlines Polaris Lounge was a world away from the controlled chaos of the main terminal at San Francisco International. Dr. Marcus Thorne watched his 6-year-old daughter, Maya, meticulously color in a picture of a unicorn, her tongue sticking out slightly in concentration. She was the spitting image of her late mother, the same warm chestnut eyes and a smile that could disarm armies. For Marcus, she was his entire world. Marcus, at 38, was a man who had built his life on precision and logic. As a founding partner at Aegis Dynamics, one of the world's leading cybersecurity firms specializing in protecting critical infrastructure, his days were spent in a digital world of threats and countermeasures. He was calm, analytical, and carried an air of quiet authority that came not from arrogance, but from a deep-seated competence. Today, however, he wasn't a cybersecurity expert. He was just Dad. "Daddy, is Grandma going to have the fluffy pancakes?" Maya asked, not looking up from her masterpiece. Marcus smiled, ruffling her hair. "The fluffiest. And she said she has a surprise for you." This trip to see his parents in Chicago was long overdue. The last 2 years had been a blur of work, grief, and the beautiful, exhausting challenge of being a single father. He'd finally cleared his schedule for 2 full weeks. No laptops, no encrypted calls, just pancakes, grandparents, and his daughter's laughter. He'd booked 2 first-class seats, 2A and 2B, not as a show of wealth, but as a promise to Maya, a promise of comfort, fun, in starting their vacation the moment they left home. He glanced at his boarding pass and his passport, neatly tucked into his travel wallet. Everything was in order, as always. He was a man who believed in order. Their boarding group was called, and Maya excitedly packed her crayons away. Holding his daughter's small hand, Marcus approached the gate. The agent, a woman in her late 40s with Susan on her name tag, offered a practiced smile to the couple in front of them. When Marcus stepped up, the smile tightened almost imperceptibly. He handed her their boarding passes and passports. Susan looked at the documents, then at Marcus, a tall, well-dressed black man in a tailored blazer and dark jeans. Then she looked at Maya, then back at Marcus. The pause was just a fraction of a second too long. "Just need to verify these," she said, her tone suddenly clipped. She typed something into her computer, her eyes flicking between the screen and his face. The couple behind them shifted their weight impatiently. "Is there a problem?" Marcus asked, his voice even and calm. "No, just procedure," Susan replied, her eyes not meeting his. After another 10 seconds that felt like a minute, she stamped the passes and handed them back. "Have a good flight." The words were automatic, devoid of warmth. Marcus felt a familiar, weary pang. It was a look he'd seen 1,000 times in his life. The subtle double take, the flicker of suspicion in a world that so often equated his skin color with being out of place, especially in spaces of privilege. He chose to ignore it. For Maya, he wouldn't let a minor slight sour the beginning of their adventure. "Come on, sweet pea," he said, leading Maya down the jet bridge. "Our sky chariot awaits." Maya giggled, her earlier excitement returning as she saw the massive plane through the window. As they stepped across the threshold into the aircraft, they were greeted by the cabin crew. A younger male flight attendant named Ben gave them a genuine warm smile. But it was the senior attendant who stepped forward, her smile as crisp and sterile as the cabin air. "Welcome aboard," she said. Her name tag read, Caroline Preston. "May I see your boarding passes?" Marcus showed them to her. She glanced at the seat numbers, 2A and 2B, and then gave Marcus the same lingering look he'd received from Susan at the gate. A look that traveled from his expensive watch to his polished shoes, as if trying to solve a puzzle. Right this way, she said, her voice a smooth professional veneer. They settled into their spacious pod seats. Maya immediately pressed her face to the window, captivated. Marcus took a deep breath, letting the day's small annoyance dissipate. They were here. They were safe. The vacation had begun. He had no way of knowing that the turbulence he was about to face had nothing to do with the weather. The first-class cabin of the Boeing 777 began to fill. A tech CEO Marcus vaguely recognized from a Forbes article took a seat across the aisle. An older couple, dripping in quiet luxury, settled in behind them. The pre-departure dance was familiar. The click of seatbelts, the fizz of champagne being poured, the low murmur of conversation. Marcus accepted a glass of orange juice for Maya and a sparkling water for himself from the friendly junior attendant, Ben. Everything felt normal. Then Caroline Preston returned. She moved with an air of practiced ownership, her eyes scanning the cabin. Marcus noticed her gaze lingered on him and Maya longer than on anyone else. She approached their seats, her professional smile firmly in place. "Sir, I'm so sorry to bother you," she began, her voice loud enough for the surrounding passengers to hear. "But we're doing a routine verification of our manifest. Could I please see your identification again?" Marcus frowned. "Again? You saw my boarding pass when we came on." "Yes, sir, I understand. This is just an additional security step," she said, her tone unwavering. "Airline policy." Marcus felt a slow burn of irritation, but he kept his composure. The last thing he wanted was a scene. He had spent his entire life navigating these moments, de-escalating situations born from other people's biases. He reached into his jacket, pulled out his travel wallet, and produced his passport. Caroline took it and examined the photo, then looked at him. She held it for an uncomfortably long time before handing it back. "Thank you, sir." She turned and walked away without asking a single other passenger for their ID. The tech CEO across the aisle briefly met Marcus's eyes before quickly looking down at his phone. The air in the cabin had shifted. The quiet hum now felt charged with unspoken tension. "Daddy, why did she need to see your picture?" Maya asked, her voice small. "It's just a safety rule, sweet pea," Marcus lied, hating that he had to. He hated that this woman's prejudice was now a stain on his daughter's perfect day. He tried to brush it off, pointing out the baggage carts moving on the tarmac below. For the next 15 minutes, the cabin crew completed their final preparations for takeoff. The captain's voice came over the intercom, announcing their flight time and wishing everyone a pleasant journey. The safety video began to play. Marcus started to relax again. It was a one-off, an unpleasant but fleeting moment. He was wrong. Just as the cabin doors were being armed and the flight was moments from pushing back from the gate, Caroline Preston returned. This time her smile was gone. It was replaced by a thin, determined line. "Sir," she said, her voice colder and more authoritative, "I'm going to need to see your identification again, and the child's as well." A wave of disbelief washed over Marcus, quickly followed by a cold, sharp anger. This was no longer a microaggression. This was targeted harassment. "I just showed you my passport not 15 minutes ago," Marcus said, his voice low and steady, but with an edge of steel that hadn't been there before. "You have not asked a single other person in this cabin for their ID. Why are you asking me for a second time?" "Sir, if you can't comply with the requests of the cabin crew, it becomes a security issue," Caroline retorted, her voice rising slightly. She was putting on a performance for the other passengers, framing him as the problem. "I need to verify that you and the child are the people on these tickets." The implication was clear and ugly. A black man in first class with a child must be suspicious. He couldn't possibly belong here. The tickets might be stolen. The child. The unspoken question hung poisonously in the air. "That's an outrageous accusation," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, yet carrying more weight than a shout. "You checked my boarding pass. You checked my passport. This is harassment." "Daddy, what's happening?" Maya whispered, her eyes wide with fear. She shrank back in her seat, clutching her unicorn coloring book to her chest. Seeing the fear in his daughter's eyes was the breaking point. The carefully constructed dam of patience Marcus had maintained his entire life finally cracked. All the years of biting his tongue, of taking the high road, of absorbing the slights and indignities with grace, It all evaporated in the face of his child's distress. "That's enough," Marcus said, his voice now devoid of any warmth. "You will not speak to me again. Get your purser, or better yet, get the captain. Now." Carolyn's eyes flashed with a triumphant gleam. She had gotten the reaction she wanted. "As you wish, sir," she said with a saccharine smile. "I'll be right back." The first-class cabin was now silent, all pretense of ignoring the situation gone. Every eye was on Marcus Thorne and his frightened little girl. The few minutes it took for Caroline to return felt like an eternity. The cabin was a pressure cooker of silent judgment. Marcus could feel the stares of the other passengers, some curious, some annoyed at the delay. A few, he hoped, sympathetic. He put a comforting arm around Maya, who had buried her face in his side. "It's okay, sweet pea," he murmured, his anger now channeled into a protective, icy calm. "Daddy's here. Everything is going to be okay." He was making a promise to her and to himself. Caroline returned, not with the purser, but with the captain himself. Captain Miller was a man in his late 50s, with a weathered face and an air of absolute authority that came from decades of command. He stood in the aisle, his arms crossed, looking down at Marcus with a severe expression. "Sir, I'm Captain Miller," he announced, his voice booming slightly in the quiet cabin. "My flight attendant, Ms. Preston, informs me that you are refusing to comply with a standard security check." "Captain," Marcus began, his voice level and respectful but firm, "with all due respect, what is happening is anything but standard. Your flight attendant has demanded my ID twice in 20 minutes. She has not asked any other passenger. She implied I am not the person on this ticket and that my daughter may not be with me legally. That is not a security check. That is profiling. It is harassment. And it is happening in front of my 6-year-old child." The captain listened, but his face remained a stony mask. He was backing his crew. It was an institutional reflex. "Sir, our crew is trained to spot irregularities. Ms. Preston is one of our most experienced attendants. If she feels a situation warrants a second look, I trust her judgment," Captain Miller said. "Airline security is my #1 priority. We can do this one of two ways. You can show me your identification right now, and we can all be on our way. Or you can refuse, and I will have you and your daughter removed from my aircraft." It was an ultimatum, delivered publicly and without a shred of compromise. He was being told in no uncertain terms that his dignity did not matter. His experience did not matter. The fear in his child's eyes did not matter. All that mattered was their unquestionable authority and his compliance. Marcus looked from the captain's implacable face to Caroline's smug expression. He saw the junior attendant, Ben, hovering in the galley doorway, a look of profound discomfort on his face. He saw the other passengers, now openly staring, their faces a gallery of mixed emotions. And then he looked down at Maya, who was trembling. In that moment, a profound clarity washed over him. This was no longer about a flight to Chicago. This was about the world he was showing his daughter. Was it a world where you bowed your head to injustice to avoid a scene? Or was it a world where you stood up for yourself, no matter the cost? He knew what his wife would have wanted him to do. He knew what he had to do. He let out a slow, deliberate breath. He looked Captain Miller directly in the eye. "Captain," Marcus said, his voice resonating with a sudden, chilling finality, "you are making a grave mistake." He did not raise his voice. He did not gesticulate. He simply spoke the words as a statement of fact. Then he reached into his pocket, but it wasn't for his wallet. He pulled out his phone. The captain's jaw tightened. "Sir, I need to remind you that we are in the final stages of departure. All electronic devices need to be in airplane mode." Marcus ignored him. He unlocked the phone with his thumb and navigated to his contacts. The cabin was so quiet that the soft clicks of the virtual keyboard were audible. He found the name he was looking for. Richard Sterling, the Chief Operating Officer of Aegis Dynamics. He pressed the call button. He did not put the phone to his ear. He put it on speaker for the entire front of the plane to hear. The phone rang once, twice. "Marcus?" A powerful baritone voice answered. "Everything all right? I thought you were taking off." "Change of plans, Richard," Marcus said, his voice like ice. We're on Global Voyager Flight 788, SFO to O'Hare. Or we were. There was a pause on the other end. What happened? Marcus looked directly at Caroline, then at the captain. We've encountered a personnel issue, an unacceptable one. I need you to do something for me, Richard. Effective immediately, I want you to cancel the Aegis Dynamics corporate account with Global Voyager Airlines. A stunned silence fell over the first-class cabin. The tech CEO's jaw literally dropped. He knew exactly who Aegis Dynamics was. Richard's voice came back over the speaker, sharp and serious. Marcus, you mean the corporate travel package? That's a $22 million a year contract. I mean the whole thing, Richard, Marcus clarified, his voice unwavering. The corporate travel, the executive charter services, and the cargo contract for our hardware logistics, all of it. Terminate the contract for cause. The cause is discriminatory and harassing behavior by their staff, creating an unsafe and hostile environment for their passengers. I will email you the full incident report with my authorization code in the next 5 minutes. Are we clear? Captain Miller's face had gone from stern to ashen. Caroline Preston looked as if she'd been struck by lightning. Crystal clear, Marcus, Richard's voice replied, a grim understanding in his tone. Consider it done. I'll have legal on it within the hour. Are you and Maya okay? We're fine, Richard. We'll be deplaning shortly. Arrange alternative transport for us, please. The best you can find. Already on it, Richard said. I'm sorry this happened, my friend. Me too, Marcus said, and ended the call. He calmly placed his phone on the armrest and looked up at the dumbfounded captain. Now, Marcus said, his voice quiet but carrying the force of a tidal wave. As you were saying, Captain? Something about removing me from your aircraft? The silence that followed Marcus's phone call was deafening. It was a vacuum, sucking the air and all the smug authority out of the front of the cabin. Captain Miller stood frozen, his face a kaleidoscope of shock, disbelief, and dawning horror. Caroline Preston's mask of professional superiority had shattered, revealing a pale, panicked woman who looked as if the floor had just vanished from beneath her. The tech CEO across the aisle was now staring at Marcus with a look of awe and utter respect. He knew the kind of power it took to casually burn a $22 million contract on principle. This wasn't some disgruntled passenger. This was a kingpin. The captain's radio on his shoulder suddenly crackled to life, a squawking, urgent sound that broke the spell. Voyager 788, this is SFO operations. Captain Miller, you have an urgent patch through from corporate headquarters. Executive VP level. Stand by. Captain Miller fumbled for his radio, his hands shaking slightly. This is Captain Miller for 788. Go ahead. A crisp, frantic voice, clearly not meant for passengers to hear, but amplified by the tense silence, blasted from the small speaker. David, what the hell is going on your aircraft? I just got a call from Richard Sterling at Aegis Dynamics. He's pulling their entire account. The whole damn thing. He's citing crew misconduct. You need to fix this, and you need to fix it 5 minutes ago. Do you understand me? The captain's face went from white to a blotchy red. He shot a venomous glare at Caroline before turning his back on the cabin and speaking into his radio in a hushed, desperate tone. Operations, we have a situation here. Stand by. He turned back to Marcus, his entire demeanor transformed. The stern, authoritative commander was gone, replaced by a man scrambling to save his career. Dr. Thorne, he said, his voice strained. The Sir had been upgraded to his professional title, a clear sign of the dramatic power shift. I believe there has been a profound misunderstanding. Marcus simply stared at him, his expression unreadable. He offered nothing. No olive branch, no flicker of compromise. He had drawn his line in the sand, and now he was watching them drown on the other side of it. Ms. Preston, the captain snapped, not even looking at her. Return to the galley, now. Caroline, looking utterly broken, scurried away without a word. Dr. Thorne, the captain pleaded, his voice now slick with desperation. Please allow me to personally apologize on behalf of Global Voyager Airlines. The behavior you experienced was unacceptable. It does not reflect our values. We We would be honored if you and your daughter would remain our guests on this flight to Chicago. I will ensure your journey is comfortable. Everything will be complimentary, of course. Marcus let the offer hang in the air for a long moment. He looked at the captain, then at the empty space where Caroline had stood. He thought about the humiliation, the public challenge to his very identity, the fear he saw in his daughter's eyes. An apology born of financial panic was not an apology. It was damage control. "Captain," Marcus said finally, his voice soft but resolute, "your apology is not accepted. Your offer is declined. My daughter and I will be leaving your aircraft. Please open the door." "Dr. Thorne, please, I must insist." "No, Captain, I must insist." Marcus cut him off, the steel returning to his voice. "You gave me an ultimatum, remember? Show my ID or be removed. I have chosen a third option. Open the door, or my next call will be to the FAA to report a crew attempting to hold passengers against their will after a clear display of discriminatory conduct." The captain flinched as if he'd been slapped. The mention of the FAA was the final nail in the coffin. He knew he was beaten. He nodded curtly, a man defeated. He spoke into his radio again, his voice heavy with resignation. "SFO ground, this is Voyager 788. We are returning to the gate. I repeat, we are returning to the gate." A collective groan went through the rest of the plane as the engines, which had been spooling up, began to power down. Marcus calmly began to gather his and Maya's things. He helped his daughter with her small backpack, his movements unhurried and deliberate. He was in complete control. As the jet bridge reconnected to the aircraft with a solid thud, a new announcement came over the cabin speakers, this time from the purser. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the delay. Due to unforeseen, logistical issues, this flight to Chicago, Global Voyager 788, has been canceled. I repeat, the flight has been canceled. We ask that all passengers please deplane with your belongings. Our gate agents will have information on rebooking. We sincerely apologize for the inconvenience." A wave of confusion and anger rippled through the entire plane. Canceled? Not just delayed, but canceled? The tech CEO looked at Marcus, his eyes wide with a new question. Marcus simply gave a slight, almost imperceptible shake of his head. He knew this wasn't just about him anymore. His one phone call had set something far bigger and far more catastrophic for the airline into motion. He just didn't know the full extent of it yet. Holding Maya's hand, Marcus Thorne stood up and walked toward the open door, leaving behind a grounded aircraft, a ruined flight attendant, a terrified captain, and a cabin full of bewildered passengers. He didn't look back once. The moment Marcus and Maya stepped off the jet bridge and back into the terminal, a woman in a sharp corporate suit was there to meet them. She introduced herself as Catherine Cole, the SFO station manager for Global Voyager. Her face was a mask of professional contrition. "Dr. Thorne, on behalf of our entire airline, I am so deeply sorry for what you just experienced," she said, her words clearly rehearsed but her panic palpable. "We have a private car waiting to take you wherever you need to go. We've also been informed that a jet has been chartered for you from a private terminal." "Thank you, Ms. Cole," Marcus said coolly. "My office handles my arrangements." He and Maya were whisked through a series of staff-only corridors, bypassing the chaos that was surely erupting back at Gate C4. As they walked, Marcus's phone buzzed. It was a secure email from Richard Sterling. He opened it. The subject line was, "Update and the real story." The email was short and explosive. "Marcus, the cancellation of GVA 788 wasn't just them trying to contain the PR fallout. It's far bigger. I just got off the phone with our main client, Omnicorp. You know that critical server upgrade we're doing for their Chicago data nexus? The one the entire new OmniCloud platform depends on? It turns out 6 of our top engineers, the only ones qualified to handle the final integration this weekend, were on that same flight, back in economy. They were booked under a general project code, not the main Aegis account, which is why their names didn't immediately flag when I pulled our contract. When GVA canceled the flight, they grounded our entire integration team. Omnicorp's launch is scheduled for Monday morning. Without our team on site in Chicago by tomorrow at the latest, they missed their deadline. Omnicorp's COO, a man named Gerald Finney, just called the CEO of Global Voyager's parent company and in his words, tore him a new one. The penalties GVA now faces from Omnicorp for grounding that essential team will dwarf the $22 million we just pulled from them. They didn't just harass a passenger. They sabotaged one of the biggest tech launches of the year. The private jet is waiting. The team is being shuttled over to meet you. You just inadvertently cost GVA a fortune and saved us from having our people on an airline that clearly has a systemic rot. Karma, my friend. Karma. See you in Chicago. Richard Marcus stopped walking. He read the email again, a slow, disbelieving smile spreading across his face. It was the twist he never saw coming. The beautiful, cosmic irony of it was staggering. Caroline Preston and Captain Miller, in their blind prejudice, hadn't just targeted a single black father. They had, in their arrogance, become the linchpin in a catastrophic corporate failure. They thought they were exercising a tiny bit of power over a man they deemed out of place. Instead, they had thrown a wrench into the gears of a multi-billion-dollar machine. He looked down at Maya, who was watching him with curious eyes. "Good news, sweet pea," he said, his voice lighter than it had been all day. "We're getting a much cooler plane." Meanwhile, back on Flight 788, chaos reigned. The deplaning passengers were irate, demanding answers. At the center of the storm was Caroline Preston. The purser had pulled her aside into the galley as soon as Marcus was gone. "What did you do, Caroline?" The purser, a woman named Linda, hissed. "What in God's name did you do?" "I was following procedure. He seemed suspicious," Caroline stammered, her defense sounding hollow even to her own ears. "Suspicious? He's Dr. Marcus Thorne of Aegis Dynamics. The man in 4D, Mr. Hastings told me. Aegis is our biggest corporate account." "Or was," Linda said, her face pale. "They just canceled the entire flight. Not delayed, canceled. They're citing unforeseen crew availability issues. They're blaming us. They're grounding the whole crew pending an investigation." Caroline's legs felt weak. Grounded. Investigation. Those were words that ended careers. All because she couldn't stomach the sight of a black man enjoying the privileges she felt he hadn't earned. Her prejudice hadn't been a shield protecting the plane. It had been a bomb that she herself had detonated. Captain Miller emerged from the cockpit, his face grim. He didn't even look at her. He spoke to Linda, but his words were meant for Caroline. "Pack your things. A corporate security team is meeting us at the crew operations center. We are to be escorted off the property." The finality in his voice was absolute. Escorted off the property. It was the walk of shame for airline staff. For Caroline Preston, a 20-year veteran who prided herself on her seniority and perfect record, it was a fate worse than termination. It was utter humiliation, and she had done it all to herself. The Gulfstream G650 was a world away from a commercial airliner, even in first class. Its cream leather seats, polished mahogany, and whisper-quiet cabin were the epitome of private luxury. Maya was mesmerized, her face pressed against the large oval window as San Francisco shrank below them. The 6 Aegis Dynamics engineers, a diverse group of men and women who regarded Marcus with a reverence usually reserved for deities, kept a respectful distance at the other end of the cabin, already deep in conversation about their project. As they leveled off at their cruising altitude, Marcus's phone buzzed again. It was an unknown number with a DC area code. He was about to ignore it, but a flicker of intuition made him answer. "Dr. Thorne speaking." "Dr. Thorne, my name is Eleanor Vance. I am the Chief Executive Officer of Global Voyager Airlines." Her voice was strained, exhausted, but carried the weight of her position. "I am calling you to offer my most profound and sincere apology for the disgraceful treatment you and your daughter received on our aircraft today." Marcus was silent for a moment. "Ms. Vance?" "Please," she continued, "there is no excuse for what happened. None. I have been in back-to-back calls with Richard Sterling at your company and Gerald Finney at Omnicorp. I am fully aware of the cascading consequences of my crew's actions." "Consequences are appropriate for actions," Marcus stated simply. "Yes, they are," Vance conceded. "I wanted to inform you personally that as of 1 hour ago, Caroline Preston's employment with Global Voyager has been terminated. Captain Miller has been suspended without pay and is facing a full internal review board. which I suspect will also result in his termination. The gate agent, Susan, has been reassigned to a non-passenger-facing role pending mandatory retraining. We are also launching a mandatory top-to-bottom bias and de-escalation training program for all 30,000 of our cabin crew and pilots, effective next month. This will forever be known internally as the Thorn Directive. Marcus absorbed the information. It was swift. It was decisive. It was also, he knew, motivated by a desperate attempt to staunch the bleeding from a self-inflicted wound that was now hemorrhaging money and reputation. Furthermore, Vance went on, her voice pleading, I know your contract with us is terminated, and I respect that decision. But I would like to offer you and your family lifetime, top-tier concierge status and complimentary flights on any global Voyager route, anywhere in the world. As a gesture of our deep regret, here it was, the attempt to buy his forgiveness, to turn him into a feel-good story they could one day spin in a press release. Ms. Vance, Marcus said, his voice polite but firm, I appreciate the direct call and the actions you've taken against your staff, but I must decline your offer. This was never about free flights. It was about respect. It was about my daughter being able to travel with her father without being made to feel like a criminal. You can't put a price on that. My only request is that you succeed with your new training program so that no one else ever has to have a day like the one we just had. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Eleanor Vance spoke again, her corporate polish was gone, replaced by a genuine note of weary resignation. I understand, Dr. Thorne. Thank you. And again, I am truly sorry. Marcus ended the call. He looked across the aisle at Maya, who had fallen asleep, her head nestled against a soft pillow, the half-colored unicorn picture resting on her lap. He felt a surge of love so powerful it almost hurt. He had protected her. He had shown her that you don't have to shout to be heard, and that sometimes the quietest actions have the loudest consequences. The hard karma had been delivered. For Caroline Preston, a career built on perceived superiority was now in ashes. Her name would be internally blacklisted, making it nearly impossible to get hired at another major airline. She had flown her last flight, all because of an ugliness she couldn't keep inside. Captain Miller, who chose to back a prejudiced crew member over a wrong passenger, had sacrificed his command and his pension on the altar of misguided loyalty. For Marcus, the outcome was bittersweet. He took no joy in people losing their jobs, but he felt a profound sense of justice. The system, for once, had worked. Not because it was designed to, but because he had possessed the unique leverage to force its hand and expose its flaws. He had turned their small, ugly stage into a global spotlight, and they had withered under its glare. The private jet touched down at a quiet executive airport outside Chicago as smoothly as a feather. A black Escalade was waiting on the tarmac to take Marcus and Maya the rest of the way. The engineering team departed in a separate van, heading directly to the Omnicorp data center to save the day. As they drove through the familiar suburban streets toward his parents' home, Maya woke up. She looked out the window, her earlier fear completely gone, replaced by the simple joy of arrival. Daddy, she said, her voice still thick with sleep. Why did we have to get off the first plane? Marcus turned in his seat to face her. He knew this was the most important conversation of the day. Because, sweet pea, he began, choosing his words with care, the woman on that plane was not being kind. She was treating us differently than everyone else, and it wasn't fair, and it made you scared. When people treat you unfairly, you don't ever have to accept it. You have to stand up for yourself calmly and strongly and show them that you deserve respect. Always. So, you canceled the plane? She asked, her eyes wide with a child's simple logic. Marcus smiled. In a way, yes. I told her boss that the way she was treating us was not okay, and her boss agreed. We should never stay in a place where we're not welcome and not respected, Maya. So we found a better way to get to Grandma's house. She seemed to understand. She nodded, then leaned over and gave him a hug. Okay, Daddy, I love you. I love you more, sweet pea, he said, holding her tight. When the Escalade pulled into the driveway, his parents were already on the porch, their faces etched with worry. Richard had called them to let them know about the change in plans. His mother hugged him tightly, a million questions in her eyes. His father, a retired judge, simply put a hand on his shoulder and gave him a look of immense pride. "Welcome home, son," he said. Later that evening, after Maya was tucked into bed, dreaming of unicorns and fluffy pancakes, Marcus sat with his father in the quiet living room, a glass of bourbon in his hand. "You did the right thing today, Marcus," his father said. "I know," Marcus replied, swirling the amber liquid. "But I hate that I had to. I hate that this is a lesson she still has to learn." "You can't protect her from the world," his father said wisely, "but you did something more important today. You showed her how to face it. You showed her her own worth. That's a lesson that will last a lifetime." Marcus looked out the window at the peaceful night sky. He had started the day just wanting to get his daughter to her grandparents. He had ended it by reshaping a tiny corner of the world, by demanding decency and holding power to account. It wasn't the vacation he had planned, but in a way it was exactly the journey he needed to take. And as he thought of his daughter sleeping safely upstairs, he knew, with absolute certainty, that he would do it all again. For her. Always. For 3 blissful days, the world outside his parents' suburban Chicago home ceased to exist for Marcus Thorne. The universe shrank to the smell of his mother's cooking, the sound of his father's quiet wisdom, and the pure, uncomplicated joy of Maya discovering the magic of a backyard sprinkler. His phone was off. His laptop remained packed. He was just a son and a father. It was everything he had wanted. But a story of such magnitude, a secret with so many witnesses, cannot be contained forever. The silence was broken on the 4th day. It began not with a bang, but with a buzz, then another, and another. His father walked into the kitchen holding his own phone, a concerned frown on his face. "Marcus, a reporter from the Wall Street Journal just called my landline. They're running a story." Marcus felt a familiar weariness creep back in. He turned his phone on. It erupted in a furious cascade of notifications, hundreds of emails, texts, and missed calls. A quick search revealed the source. The story had broken, and it was everywhere. The initial article, penned by a veteran business journalist, was titled, "The $22 million Complaint, How One Man's Stand Against Discrimination Grounded More Than a Flight." The source was an anonymous but verified passenger in the first-class cabin. Marcus knew instantly it was the tech CEO, Mr. Hastings. The piece was expertly written, framing the incident not just as a human interest story, but as a brutal case study in corporate risk management. It detailed the calm phone call, the mention of Aegis dynamics, and the subsequent catastrophic cancellation of the flight and its connection to the Omnicorp launch. From there, the story went supernova. Within hours, Cheers Global Voyager and Shark Marcus Thorne were trending. Major news networks picked it up. Photos of him from his company's website were suddenly on screen next to file photos of a Global Voyager 777. The narrative was explosive, a perfect storm of corporate drama, racial injustice, and David and Goliath power dynamics. Except in this version, David was also a Goliath. The public reaction was a tidal wave. The vast majority was overwhelmingly supportive. People lauded his calm resolve, his refusal to be victimized. He was hailed as a hero who had used his power to force accountability where there was usually none. Parents of color shared their own painful stories of traveling with their children. Countless others told of their own experiences with discrimination, celebrating that for once there was an immediate and satisfying consequence. But there was also a vocal minority. Pundits and anonymous comment sections accused him of arrogance, of using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. They painted him as a privileged elitist who was willing to ruin careers and disrupt the travel plans of hundreds of people over a minor slight. "Man cancels flight because his feelings were hurt," one headline from a notorious tabloid screamed. Back in Chicago, the siege began. A news van parked across the street from his parents' house. The doorbell rang incessantly. "This is what you were trying to avoid, isn't it?" his father, Judge William Thorne, said as they watched a reporter attempt a live shot from their lawn. "I didn't do this for fame, Dad," Marcus said, pulling the blind shut. "I did it for Maya. For me. Now the whole world wants to turn it into a spectacle." "Sometimes, son, a private act has a public meaning," his father replied, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You can't control the spectacle, but you can control your response to it. You can't let them define you or what you did." He was right. Marcus knew he couldn't remain silent. To do so would allow the negative narratives to fester and would dishonor the support he was receiving. He contacted Richard Sterling in the Aegis Dynamics Communications team. He would not do interviews. He would not go on television. He would issue one and only one written statement. The statement was released that evening. It was concise, dignified, and powerful. The events on GVA Flight 788 were unfortunate and deeply personal. My goal was not to disrupt travel or cause undue hardship to other passengers, for which I am truly sorry. My goal was simply to protect my daughter and affirm my dignity in the face of targeted, unwarranted scrutiny. The issue of bias, conscious or unconscious, is not solved in a single day, but it is confronted in single moments. This was one of those moments. I will be making no further comment on this matter and ask for privacy for my family. I would encourage the energy and attention this story has generated to be focused on the broader issues of creating more equitable and respectful spaces for all people, in the skies and on the ground. The statement had its intended effect. It starved the media frenzy of oxygen while simultaneously cementing his position as a man of principle. It recentered the narrative on the real issue. Meanwhile, the karma for the other players continued its relentless grind. A freelance photographer tracked down Caroline Preston. A grainy photo of her, looking harried and unrecognizable without her uniform, appeared online. The accompanying article detailed her termination and the fact that she had put her house up for sale. There was no public sympathy. Her actions, seen through the lens of Marcus's calm dignity, were cast in an unforgivable light. She had become a pariah. A living symbol of prejudice served its just desserts. The world, Marcus knew, could be a harsh and unforgiving place. He felt a sliver of pity for the woman, not for her fate, but for the bitterness that must have lived in her heart to make her act as she did. His battle was over, but hers, it seemed, was just beginning. 6 months passed. The world, as it always does, moved on. The news cycle churned through a dozen other outrages and sensations. The story of Flight 788 faded from the headlines, but it didn't disappear. It settled into the bedrock of corporate lore and the collective consciousness, becoming an echo, a warning. On a Tuesday morning, on Global Voyager Flight 1129 from Dallas to Boston, that echo was heard. Ben, the junior flight attendant from Marcus's flight, was now the purser. The promotion had come as part of the massive internal shakeup. He was overseeing the boarding process when he noticed a senior attendant grilling a young man in a hoodie who was struggling to fit his musical instrument case into the overhead bin. The attendant's tone was sharp, her questions bordering on accusatory. Ben felt a cold flash of déjà vu. He immediately walked over. "Is everything all right here?" he asked, his voice calm and friendly. "This passenger's bag won't fit. It looks non-compliant," the attendant said stiffly. Ben looked at the young man, who was clearly flustered and embarrassed. "It's a cello," the musician mumbled. "I called ahead. They told me it would be okay." Old procedure would have been to back his crew member, escalate, and possibly remove the passenger and his expensive instrument. But Ben's mind went straight to the Thorn Directive, the first module of their new, mandatory training program. De-escalate, listen, assume positive intent. "Let's not worry about the bin," Ben said with a smile. "We have a closet up front where we can store it safely for you. It will be perfectly secure. Let me take care of that." The young man's relief was immense. "Oh, thank you. Seriously, thank you." Later in the galley, the senior attendant confronted him. "You undermined my authority." "No," Ben corrected her gently but firmly. "I protected our airline. I de-escalated a situation that was making a passenger feel singled out and stressed. We are not security agents, we are hosts. That was lesson 1 of the Thorn Directive, remember?" The attendant fell silent, recognizing the truth. The name of the man who had cost the company so much was now invoked daily to save it from itself. The echo of his actions was creating a new standard of decency. Thousands of miles away, Marcus Thorn was seeing the echoes as well. They came in the form of occasional emails forwarded by his assistant, people who had heard his story and been inspired. One came from a young female engineer who spoke up against a sexist boss and won. Another came from a family who fought a discriminatory housing application and got the home they deserved. This morning it was an email with the subject line, Thank you. It was from a young black doctor at a prestigious hospital. She wrote that she had been repeatedly mistaken for a janitor or an orderly by older patients. For months, she had endured it with a polite correction. But last week, after a particularly condescending encounter, she remembered his story. She didn't cause a scene. She calmly filed a formal complaint with the hospital's patient advocacy board, citing a pattern of microaggressions that created a hostile work environment. The hospital, fearing a PR nightmare, immediately launched a new patient sensitivity initiative. "You showed me that you don't have to be loud to be heard," she wrote. "You just have to know your own value and refuse to let anyone else discount it. Thank you." Marcus closed the email, a profound sense of peace settling over him. He had never sought to be a role model, but he had become one nonetheless. That weekend, he and Maya were finally taking their real vacation. They were flying to Maui. As they boarded the Apex Air flight, Aegis Dynamics' new exclusive carrier, the contrast was stark. The flight crew was a vibrant mix of ethnicities and backgrounds. The purser, a warm and engaging black woman, winked at Maya as they found their seats. "Welcome aboard, you two," she said. "We're going to take great care of you." As the plane soared over the Pacific, Maya was watching a movie, giggling to herself. Marcus looked out at the endless blue horizon. He thought about the ugliness of that day 6 months ago. He had gone into it a private man and emerged a public symbol. He had lost a day of his vacation, but had gifted his daughter a lesson that would last her entire life. He hadn't just rerouted their travel plans, he had rerouted a small piece of the future. He hadn't built a perfect world for her. That was impossible. But he had proven that it was possible to fight for a better one. And as he watched his daughter, safe, happy, and flying toward the sun in a sky that felt just a little bit friendlier, he knew, without a single doubt, that it was a fight he would always be willing to win. The story of Dr. Marcus Thorne and his daughter isn't just an anecdote about a canceled flight. It's a powerful testament to the fact that dignity is not negotiable. It's a reminder that prejudice, whether it's in the open or hidden behind a polite smile and a corporate uniform, has a cost. Marcus possessed a unique power to make that cost immediately apparent, but the principle he stood for is universal. He fought his battle not with rage, but with resolve, proving that the most effective response to injustice is often a calm, strategic refusal to tolerate it. What happened on Global Voyager Flight 788 is a powerful reminder that accountability is possible. If this story resonated with you, if you believe in standing up for what's right, please give this video a like and share it to spread the message. Subscribe to the channel for more true stories where karma delivers the final verdict. And let us know in the comments, what would you have done in his situation?